Welcome back everyone, and thank you so much for bearing with me. I've been away for a week planning the future of this channel. I've also been playing the organ at London Bridge Station, which was good fun. And I've been trying my best to rehome 2 church organs in good condition, but where their buildings are either being demolished or sold. Billy and I have also been to one of the most poignant churches I've ever visited actually, and that's what this video is about. So let me start with these words. I will only remark here that wind instruments, including the human voice, and stringed instruments, capable of continuous sound, have generally a beneficial effect, while the pianoforte, with such instruments as have no continuity of sound, has just the reverse. The finest piano playing will damage the sick, while an air like Home Sweet Home on the most ordinary grinding organ will sensibly soothe them. Florence Nightingale, 1860. Florence Nightingale was born in Italy, in the city which gave her her name. She grew up at the family home of Embley Park near Romsey, and this is where, aged 16, she claimed she'd felt a divine calling while walking in the grounds. She was persuaded against nurse training at Salisbury Infirmary, but she'd go on to become a heroine and a founder of modern healthcare. Today we were heading back to 1910, to the church she loved and where she's buried with her parents. Down country lanes we eventually arrive at the village of Wellow, 4 miles from Embley. St Margaret's is the most tranquil and secluded church I've ever seen. The glare of the sun plays havoc with my outfit, but at least I can't complain about the weather. Welcome to the Church of St Margaret of Antioch here in Hampshire, this really remote village of East Wellow. It's very difficult to find this church. Florence Nightingale died aged 90 in 1910. Whilst a memorial service was being held attended by 3,000 people in St Paul's Cathedral, her coffin was carried peacefully and slowly up this path for her formal and unpublicised funeral service. The Morning Post of August the 22nd, 1910 says this. At the Lich Gate stood the officiating clergy, the Reverend S.M. Watson, Vicar of East Wellow, and the Reverend T.S. Gardner of London, a friend of the family, to receive the body. The coffin was carried on the shoulders of the guardsmen up the steep path leading to the church, which was lined with people standing 3 or 4 deep under dripping umbrellas. Under the porch of the church stood a Crimean veteran, 84-year-old, feeble and one-eyed, Private John Kneller of the 23rd Foot. He lost his eye in the trenches, and as he lay for 3 months in hospital at Scutari, he often saw Florence Nightingale carrying her lantern on her nightly visits. She's remembered by the bench just outside the church, which overlooks her memorial. But before we show you that, let's go inside. Opening the 15th century door. Welcome, my friends, to St Margaret's. St Margaret was the patron saint of women in childbirth. There are about 200 churches dedicated to her, and she was extremely popular at the time.
This church dates to the 13th century. There are some amazing ancient features here, like these wall paintings, the beams on the roof. And looking up in the chancel, in the more recent history of this church, you can see a 19th century musket, which apparently arrived here in about 1808 after a terrible farming accident. It's quite possibly a reminder to the villagers of the danger of guns. The chancel here is stunning, and you can imagine how great the acoustic is in this building, especially with a pipe organ as big as that. This is where Florence Nightingale's casket would have been placed for her funeral service. At the time, the church could only hold about 200 people, and most of those were local gentry or farm labourers.
In addition to what I noticed, this is what the Morning Post said more than 100 years ago. The church is a 13th century edifice. Its outer walls are coated with flints set in mortar, and its roof of red tiles is surmounted by a wooden bell tower. Not much has changed. Inside it was bare of ornamentation. The walls up to the dark oaken roof are whitewashed. On one side, this coating was peeling off, disclosing a rude coloured fresco, painted, it is supposed, in the 13th century, and depicting the martyrdom of St. Thomas of Canterbury. So this is what the mourners would have seen when they attended Florence's funeral. Let's now go outside to show you the memorial.
After you. And here, the focal point of the churchyard is her memorial. She's buried next to her parents, and her own name is only marked by her initials, FM, born 12th of May 1820, died 13th of August 1910.
There's a real sadness about this building, but also a beauty in its tranquility, and you can imagine why she'd want to be buried here. If you're new to this channel, you're most welcome here, because what we do is something I don't think anybody else does on YouTube, which is to fill these buildings with heavenly music to illuminate their stories. What Billy and I found inside the Church of St. Margaret was a huge pipe organ in really, really good condition.
This is one of the largest organs we've been to see. It dates from the 1920s. It says here that it was given by Mr. and Mrs. Crossfield, who lived in Embley Park, which is of course where Florence Nightingale grew up. An absolutely magnificent pipe organ. It's very big for this church. I'd almost say it was too big, but it isn't too big at all. It's perfect. It's perfect for doing concerts. It's perfect for accompanying services. The larger the pipe organ is, the more support the congregation gets, and that can only be a good thing. So we have couplers all along the top here, which draw the sound from this keyboard down to this one. The reason why there are so many is because there are also octaves, which draw an octave higher down to this keyboard to make the organ louder, use more of the pipes, or indeed an octave lower. Right hand side is the grate, left hand side the swell, and then the pedal department down here. The organ also has some electric thumb pistons. Notice how they pull out a specific combination of stops. Really handy.
To show you the colours of this organ, I wanted to start with a hymn tune composed by an officer of the Crimean War. Alexander Ewing was a Scottish composer, and while he was away in Constantinople, one of his hymn tunes was submitted to Hymns Ancient and Modern by a relative of his, who, incidentally, was also called Alexander Ewing, the bishop. The tune was accepted, and it was published with these words: Jerusalem the golden, with milk and honey blessed, beneath your contemplation sink heart and voice oppressed. I know not, oh, I know not, what joys await me there, what radiancy of glory, what bliss beyond compare. Jerusalem the Golden, composed by Alexander Ewing, who had the role equivalent to a captain during the Crimean War, and the words to that hymn were by John Mason Neale. We'll return to hymns in a moment, but before we do, let me remind you of the quote that I read at the beginning. I will only remark here that wind instruments, including the human voice, and stringed instruments capable of continuous sound have generally a beneficial effect. The finest piano playing will damage the sick, while an air like Home Sweet Home on the most ordinary grinding organ will sensibly soothe them. To thee I'll return, overburdened with care. The heart's dearest solace will smile on me there. No more from that cottage again will I roam. Be it ever so humble, there's no place like home. I'd like to play you one of the hymns played at Florence Nightingale's memorial service, but before I do, many YouTubers at this stage in their careers rely on sponsorship. So you'd listen to me talking about one of my sponsors for 5 minutes in the middle of the video. I don't have any sponsors, but you're probably aware I do rely on donations to keep me on the road. It does cost a lot to travel to these churches, and one of my plans is to really focus on the stories of individuals and using music to tell those stories and illuminate the history of the buildings. That means I have to travel further to certain churches of interest, just like Florence Nightingale's, and all of that costs me money, and it costs me a lot of time. I also have to pay Billy. He doesn't do it for free, I'm afraid, and we both spend a lot of time practicing. So if you enjoy my films, do consider donating. There's a link beneath the video which takes you to my PayPal page. It really is the best way of donating. And if you'd like to support me, I would be really grateful for any donations that you can give. It really keeps me on the road, and it keeps me from having to tell you about sponsors. So, let me play you a hymn which was one of Florence Nightingale's favourites. It was the closing hymn from her memorial service at St. Paul's Cathedral. The King of Love my shepherd is, whose goodness faileth never. I lack nothing if I am his, and he is mine forever. Where streams of living water flow, my ransomed soul he leadeth, and where the verdant pastures grow, with food celestial feedeth. In death's dark vale I fear no ill, with thee, dear Lord, beside me. Thy rod and staff my comfort still, thy cross before to guide me. The King of Love, my shepherd is. What a fantastic tune. Those words I read you just before I played it take on a whole new significance when you see this photo. You might have seen this before. It's from 1855, during the Crimean War. It was taken by one of the most eminent photographers, Roger Fenton. Look at that ravine there, littered with cannonballs from the Russian defences. It's a really iconic image of war. And that area was actually called the Valley in the Shadow of Death. It was nicknamed that by the British soldiers. According to the Florence Nightingale Museum, the Crimean War is mostly remembered for three things: the charge of the Light Brigade, which was a complete disaster, mismanagement in the British Army, and Florence Nightingale. In the transept of St. Margaret's, you'll see a replica of a cross known as the Scutari Cross, which was given to Florence Nightingale by a British soldier in hospital.
It says here it's made from shot and shrapnel from the battlefield. Following her death, the cross passed to St. Margaret's Church and remained here until Christmas 1991, when it was taken by thieves. We hope it may one day be recognised somewhere in the world and return to this, its rightful place, it says here.
The fact that the original was stolen in 1991 makes it even more poignant. I'd like to end this video on a sombre note about the harsh reality of what we've seen here. My favourite poet does justice to this better than I ever could, so I'll leave the last word to Billy. Thank you for watching.
Come, you masters of war, you that build the big guns, you that build the death planes, you that build all the bombs, you that hide behind walls, you that hide behind desks. I just want you to know that I can see through your masks. You that never done nothing but build to destroy. You play with my world like it's your little toy. You put a gun in my hand and you hide from my eyes, and you turn and run farther when the fast bullets fly. Like Judas of old, you lie and deceive. A world war can be won, you want me to believe, but I see through your eyes, and I see through your brain, like I see through the water that runs down my drain. You fasten all the triggers for others to fire, then you sit back and watch when the death count gets higher. You hide in your mansion while the young people's blood flows out of their bodies and is buried in the mud. You've thrown the worst fear that can ever be hurled, a fear to bring children into the world, for threatening my baby unborn and unnamed. Oh, you ain't worth the blood that runs through your veins. How much do I know than to talk out of turn? You might say that I'm young, you might say I'm unlearned, but there's one thing I know, though I'm younger than you, that even Jesus would never forgive what you do.